Well, thanks, Bill. Good morning, everyone. Actually, good afternoon, I guess it is now. We appreciate you all being here. And I know it's kind of a tough day with the basketball game going on and lots of hearings, and everyone's back from the transmittal break. So I appreciate you all taking the time to take a few minutes and listen to what we have to say. As Bill mentioned, Mountain States Policy Center was founded in 2022. And we are a free market think tank. And think tanks, they take a while to get going. It's not something that happens overnight. And so the success that we've been able to have, not only here in Montana, but also in Idaho as well, in just the first 36 months has really been incredible. So Jason is going to talk a little bit about some of the policy work that we've done and his meeting with the governor's office this morning. And I'm hopeful that the materials that are on your seats today will be helpful to not only you, but also other legislators who may be considering different policies throughout the session and also throughout the time that we're not in session and we're coming up with different ideas and different thoughts. We are a 501c3. We are a nonprofit organization, which means that we do not endorse candidates. We don't get into the game of saying vote for this person or vote for that person. We don't even tell legislators how to vote, but we are here as a resource to be able to tell you here are some good policy ideas. Here's something that we believe, based on our research, would be good for the citizens of the state, would be good for our businesses in our state, and follows a free market direction. We do not also get into any of the social issues. We're purely economic. So you'll see us opine on issues like agriculture, environment, government reform, budget and tax, healthcare, transportation, those type of things. It's not that social issues aren't important. They certainly are important. But we want to make sure that we're staying in our lane and providing the research and analysis that we can on the topics that we have the most amount of perspective in. So there's a couple of items on your seats today, and you're welcome to take the extras that are in the room as well. One is our policy manual, which is 200 pages of very light reading. You'll enjoy it thoroughly. Has all of our research and recommendations and some of the facts and figures behind those research and recommendations for you. Every other year, I should say, we do a copy of this policy manual and update it, and we'll have a new copy in 2026 coming out as well. So it is a really critical tool that we give away for free to all lawmakers. We will send all lawmakers a copy in the mail when it comes out. This is the one from last year. And each year that it comes out, we will send new copies out to lawmakers as well. You'll also see this, which is one of our new studies talking about Montana's taxes and the need for transparency and reform there. I'm not going to steal Jason's thunder. I'll let him speak on that. You'll also find a flyer for our dinner event coming up in Billings. So each year we do what we call a Montana Liberty Dinner, where we bring in a keynote speaker. Last year it was Kim Strassel of the Wall Street Journal. This year, it's going to be Dr. Ben Carson on November 6th at the Billings Doubletree. So hopefully all of you can join us and help us spread the word to other legislators. Lawmakers get in for free as a guest, and the reason why we do that, of course, is as a thank you for lawmakers, but also because we want to make sure that you have the ability to come and see what the organization is all about and find out more about Mountain States Policy Center. So again, November 6th, it's a Thursday night. We will have a room block at the Doubletree if you're interested in attending that event. More information will be coming out in your email. You'll also see on those white papers some of the more recent op-eds. So we're really excited about the opportunity to be able to share free market ideas in the media. Now, look, I worked in media for 10 years. I know media is not exactly fair all the time, but we do believe it's our responsibility as an organization to get out in the media and to tell media what we think about issues and give media a free market perspective. Because if we don't do that, no one else will. And it is sometimes difficult to get the media to understand what a free market perspective is and why we're making the recommendations that we're making. So you'll see three different op-eds there, one about the Montana Supreme Court decision, on the environmental issue, the climate change issue. And then you'll also see a healthcare one that Dr. Roger Stark, our healthcare fellow, did that was printed in the Missoulian, and then another one that was printed in the Billings Gazette. So all told, I believe we're in the media almost every other day, if not every day, somewhere in the state, if you're looking for us. So we hope to be able to continue that, and we have a great relationship with the media across the state to be able to get that message out there. So Jason Mercier is our Vice President, Director of our Research Program at Mountain States Policy Center. I'm going to turn it over to him to talk a little bit about some of the research work that he and his team are doing as of right now.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So you may be asking yourself, why, there's a lot of groups that do policy, a lot of think tank groups. Why should you care about somebody that's looking not only at Montana, but beyond into other states and nationally and internationally? Well, the reason for that is there is no dividing line that stops good policy from advancing across the country and the world. And there's no line that stops bad policy from creeping in to Montana from other places. And we kind of have a bird's eye view across the region and also across the country on these best practices, on these benchmarks. Where are things working? Where aren't they working? And for the policy people in here, you'll know this, there is no new idea under the sun. It has been tried someplace, maybe as far back as the Roman Empire, either succeeded or failed, but we have a lot of new lawmakers, you have a lot of new elected officials, so everything feels like a new idea at that time. But if part of the role that we're playing is to say, if you like something you see in the policy manual, or you've got this idea from a constituent about how to address the property taxes or improve the regulatory climate, count on us as a resource to not vet that idea. We're not going to tell you should do it, you shouldn't do it, but we can tell you what the experience has been in other states, in other countries. Part of what we're doing also is following what's happening at the congressional level. So a lot of the reason why I have this fantastic, easily haircut to maintain is reading GAO audits, reading federal audits, state budgets, 4,000 bills across the 4 states. We're tracking this so you don't have to, and can be that resource on what's working, what's not working, and how do we improve Montana's business climate and the ability for individuals to have the most individual liberty and grow their families. And as the Secretary of State will tell you, you're winning a lot of these races, especially on the regulatory front. You just celebrated reducing 25% of your regulatory reform code. That's putting Montana at the forefront of that, along with Idaho. These are some of the best practices we're now telling our neighbors in Washington, who are on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, constantly ranking in the 47th or 50th nationally, while you guys are in the top 5. But there's still more opportunities to do, right? We're all in this fierce race, this economic race for capital, for new entrepreneurs, and for citizens, and they are voting with their feet. You're seeing this in the new census data. You're seeing this in potential changes in the congressional representation when we go through the new census process. But with that growth comes growing pains, which is why I believe, hearing from one of your senators, you've got 15 different property tax bills, right? Because you're getting that growth. People are moving here and the impact on that. So part of what we were talking about with the governor's policy staff this morning, and where we want to be a resource for you, as Chris teased, this is brand new, just came out today, and it's addressing a lot of the framework on your tax structure, on the rates, on the transparency. And let me tell you why that matters. There is zero chance when the session finally ends in the end of April, early May, that you're going to be passing a substantial tax increase, right? That your current legislators aren't going to do that. Your leadership's not going to do that. Your governor's not going to sign that. I could have told you the exact same thing about California in 1980. Things change. Personalities change, elections change. And that's not always good for your business climate, for your citizens. So what you want to do while you have the good leadership that you have and you have the political capability to do it is to institutionalize those things that are making Montana a good place to do business and have a good tax structure. And one of the ways you can do that, and it already exists in 17 other states, but not in Montana, are restrictions on tax increase, constitutional. And these type of restrictions exist in these uber conservative states of California and Oregon and Colorado. right? It takes a 2/3 vote to raise taxes in California. Now they have a 2/3 majority of the legislature that allows them to do that. That's a high threshold. It's a 3/5 vote in Oregon. In Colorado, they cannot raise taxes without a vote of the people. Any tax, any fee. What these type of restrictions allow you to do, not to make a tax increase impossible, because you may have a situation where you need to have additional resources to meet whatever the high priority needs of your citizens are. But you don't want to have a whipsaw election to election radically changing your tax structure. And that's what is being experienced right now in Washington. While you have been reducing your rates and focusing on tax relief, in every session that you've been in here, you've provided that relief back, the exact opposite has happened in Washington. They used to have a tax restriction. It was a 2/3 requirement to raise taxes, but it was statutory. It wasn't constitutional. What can happen with the statute? The next majority can change it. And that happened in 2005. This statutory tax restriction was repealed. So what's happened every single year for the last 20 years in Washington? Every single year, taxes have been increased because they didn't have that protection for their citizens. So what we encourage Montana to take a look at, and I'm not going to tell you it should be voter approval like in Colorado, or it should be 2/3 like it is in California, or 3/5, but whatever that threshold is, whatever that supermajority threshold is, pop it into your constitution so that in 15 years, we're not having this conversation about why Montana looks like California. Institutionalize that tax protection. Now, a lot of what's happening right now on property taxes, you can address this animal many different ways, right? You can do what California did in the 70s with the Gann Amendment and cap your assessed values on an owner-occupied home. Don't do that. It's a golden handcuff. You can't sell your home because your property taxes automatically reset. It causes a lot of economic distortions. That's one way you could do this. You could do what states like Idaho and Washington have and have a hard cap, right? It can't grow more than 1%. It can't grow more than 3%. You can restrict the mill rates. So these are all restrictions on how much that tax can increase, which is good, but you're not addressing what's driving that tax increase in the first place. The property tax is a budget-driven tax, and almost all of this is happening at the local level. So if you were to ask me, and I know you can't go back to your constituents and say this, but if you were to ask me, who is responsible for my property tax increase? I need to go look in the mirror. I am. Either through the levies I'm improving, or not engaging at the local level on my city budget, on my county budget, on the library budget. It's a budget-driven process. The assessors get a bad name. All the assessors are doing is after that budget is set, is allocating it based upon the values. That's not the driver, it's the spending. So how do you address that? How do you get that transparent conversation with voters about what's actually driving the tax burden? It's something called truth in taxation. Utah has been doing this since the 1980s. Several of the states have come on board in the last few years. And what I really like about this is it doesn't tie anybody's hands, right? It's not a levy cap. It's not an assessment cap. It's not a mill cap. What truth in taxation is rather than you're already as a local government required to give a notification to your constituents that you're going to have a budget hearing. Nobody ever comes to those. Why? What does that mean to me? Okay, you're going to adopt a budget, but what does that mean to me as a taxpayer? So what truth in taxation requires is it's not just, hey, we're having a budget hearing. It's that we're having a hearing, and if we adopt this budget, this is how much it's going to change your property tax levy. And everybody in that district gets a postcard that's individualized to their property, showing how much that tax is going to change if this budget is adopted. Now, as you can imagine, when you have that level of transparency with your voters, those asks get a little more conservative. And I have a perfect example for you. This was recently enacted in Nebraska, and under their first cycle of truth in taxation, a local city was asking for a 20% increase in their budget. And then everybody got their postcards showing how that was going to change their property tax. After that public hearing, that 20% increase was dropped to 5%. Why? Their hands weren't tied, they weren't restricted, but it was very clear what that would mean to the tax burden and the citizens engaged. And this is something that can be easily done without tying any local community's hands. We're just saying you've got to be very clear, very transparent about when you adopt that budget, what that means to the individual taxpayer. And the study has an example of what that postcard looks like that Utah mails out. And this kind of leads to some other transparency things that we can get into about who is driving, again, that tax burden. right? So a lot of times lawmakers are getting the blame for the property taxes. It's a very small portion. In Montana, there are 1,400 taxing districts. That means there are 1,400 entities authorized to impose a tax liability on the citizen. As a taxpayer, I'm paying taxes. Am I paying it to the feds? Am I paying it to the state? Am I paying it to the county, to the school, to the library, to the sewer district? I'm just paying taxes. That's all often why you're just going to go complain to your state legislator. So one of the concepts that we're encouraging to take a look at, we call a tax transparency website. And what this is it's basically just a mapping program of all those 1,400 taxing districts. So a citizen can go in, put in their home address, or put in their business address, and see every taxing district that they're subject to, at which rate, and not for a liability standpoint, but for an educational standpoint, what's that mean to my tax burden? So not only does this give you the transparency about who's imposing which tax and why, but it gets into a little bit of competition amongst cities. Let's say I want to open up my pizzeria in Bozeman versus Billings. What's my tax liability going to look like? It gives you that information. It also starts to help make that connection again that the budget is driving the spending, going back to the truth in taxation. Because now I know when I get that breakdown of those taxing districts I'm subject to, I was complaining to my city about this tax, but they're not responsible for it. That's being levied at the county level. So you're starting to help redirect and educate the taxpayer about where their tax liability is coming from and what it's going to. And what it's going to comes to another fun thing that, again, Utah's been doing. It's called a taxpayer receipt. Now, I know there's no sales tax in Montana, so when you look at your grocery burden or receipt, you're not seeing that. But you're getting a breakdown, right? You can see, well, my milk costs this, my cereal costs this. I'm not going to tell you what your eggs cost because it's too scary. But you get that breakdown. So this is the concept on the taxpayer receipt that Utah's been doing, is it takes that budget and it just breaks it down on an individual level. So you can type into this website what your annual income is, what the size of your household is, how many cars you have, and it will translate that into, well, this is your share of the budget that went to transportation. This is your share of your budget that went to environmental programs. This is your share of the budget that went to sewer maintaining, whatever it might be. So just kind of, again, breaks down that, when you say at the state level, you've got $1 billion budget, what does that mean to me as an individual taxpayer? Right? This is helping break down that budget to where you can see exactly where those tax dollars are going. And one other thing on the transparency thing, when you go to the gas station, and I want to congratulate Montana. I live in Washington. I wish I had your gas prices because you're not paying for an environmental cap and trade law like we are. But you may not know how much of that purchase that you made for your gas actually went to taxes. So let's do a little poll. How much per gallon of that is federal tax? Anybody know? Yeah, 18.7 cents. So how much is state? That's just over 33 cents, right? So that per gallon of tax that you're paying is on tax. But when I get my fill up at the pump, I don't know that. So this truth in labeling concept, again, something that several states have been doing, it's just as simple as putting a sticker on the gas pump right there where you can see your regular, your premium, your diesel. There'll be a sticker that breaks down per gallon. This is how much is state. This is how much is federal. And thankfully, you don't have a local. Some states have a local, but you could add that as well. So you're just educating the citizens again on how much of that purchase is actual taxes. And then when you're actually looking at comparison of, well, how much is a gallon of gas in Bozeman versus Billings, you're getting more of that apples to apples comparison. So you've got make sure that you institutionalize your tax structure so you don't become California, right? Put that into your constitution now. Provide more transparency to your citizens on who they're paying taxes to and why, the taxing transparency. The receipt, so you can see just on an educational level what part of the budget is going to different things. And on the property taxes, there are many different ways you can do this. The one that I like the best is, again, that truth in taxation, because that gets the education directly to the voters about who's driving that tax increase. Right? It's not the state. It's the local spending, and it's themselves and their levies. And the more transparency and the more information we can empower citizens with, hopefully the less complaints you get as lawmakers and the better policy that's made at the state level. So those are kind of the tax things I wanted to hit. Chris, anything else that you wanted me to go over? Okay.
I have some questions.
Hopefully we have answers.
Go ahead.
So I was just glancing through. Thank you so much for this. And I think I had one from a couple of years ago, but a lot of the data and the graphs in here are from 2022. And I know you said you're doing a new publication in 2026. Is there anything in the interim that you would be able to share with data through like 2024 when it comes to like the spending on the education and the ranking of that, the national report cards, the voter turnout, all of those, since 2022 is actually.
Yeah.
But I know when you're gathering data,
Now, this is going to be a point in time publication, which is why we'll update it every 2 years. But yes, any data point, any information that you want an update on, we can get that for you.
okay, perfect. And then where do you pull your data from?
Oh, it's going to be everything you can think of. We'll be pulling from federal databases, state databases. We'll be crunching it ourselves through public records. It's just going to be dependent upon the information that's being compared.
So for Montana, where did you get your data?
For which one?
For Montana,
But for which?
just all of the education spending and all of that type of stuff.
So on education spending, oftentimes it comes from state sources. So either a state superintendent or a state board of education. I'd have to look specifically at the Montana numbers to see exactly where they came from. Usually we have all the data points footnoted in here so that you can see where it's coming from. So I'd have to double check inside the policy manual, but I will tell you, yes, those numbers update each and every year. The NAEP scores, which is the National Assessment of Education Progress, just came out a few weeks ago with the updated numbers. Montana did okay, comparatively speaking, but all states are still struggling, especially post-COVID. I think there was only 1 or 2 states that actually have done better since the COVID shutdowns that we've had across the country. So those numbers are a little bit concerning to us, and it really. Unfortunately, the belief is that if we just spend more money, we'll see those numbers improve, and we simply haven't seen that. In fact, Montana actually gets pretty good bang for its buck, comparatively speaking. Idaho, Utah both spend in the lower quadrants of all the different states. In fact, Utah is number 50, Idaho's number 49. I believe Montana's about 40th, 38th, somewhere in there. And all of those states do better when you compare them on the NAEP scores and on other assessments that are put out there than states like New York, which spend $25,000, $30,000 per student per year. And California, Washington State spends $19,000 per student per year. I mean, you think about that total, and if you have a class of 20 students or 25 students, I mean, you're approaching $500,000 just for that classroom. If you say, okay, let's pay the teacher $100,000, which most teachers don't get paid $100,000, but even if you did pay the teacher $100,000, you'd still have $400,000 left over. And yet we are not seeing any sort of increase in student outcomes or assessments as a result of those increases in spending, which is disappointing. Because I think the narrative remains out there that schools are underfunded, that we just need to fund them more, and then we'd see the results, and we simply haven't.
On the spending, do you have information? There's a lot of good information on like the revenue and tax and whatnot, but on the spending, do you have any like population, size of government spending compared to the population information along those lines? Because I mean, yes, we're talking taxes, but a lot of it has to do with a spending problem, and I think people don't make the connection when you're spending money. You have to pay. You know, it's.
That's actually my first project when session ends, is to do a benchmarking across the region on that, on the per capita spending, on the FTEs, getting into some of the impact on exports, trade partners. So yeah, don't have it today. I could get you that, but we'll actually have a publication out. Let's see, session ends end of April, probably sometime in May, June.
Well, and I would love to know the sources, even like with the state budget. You know, I think folks, when it comes to statistics, they can carve out, oh, well, we're not going to include statutory appropriation. we're not going to include budget amendments. We're not going to include carry forward money. And they have a way of taking the data and making it for whatever argument they want, but it's all money. It's all money and it's all spending.
Yep.
So I think when we're having conversations about spending, you've got to include all different types of authority and get the full picture of what the spending problem is.
Yeah. Yeah, we generally will go off of probably either the NASBO numbers or I'll just go directly to your balance sheet. And one other thing that we're talking about what other states are doing on the education question. There's a couple of bills moving in Idaho right now because you already had the ESA for the special needs children in Montana. Idaho didn't have any of those things. So what passed this year was a tax credit. But a lot of the complaints that were heard during that debate is, well, you're allowing this tax credit to go to private schools that don't have the regulations that we have in the public schools, and that's not fair. It's like, well, you're right. There are too many regulations. So something that happened after Hurricane Katrina back in 2005 is the entire New Orleans school district was reconstituted as a charter district. Every public school in New Orleans became a charter school. And they were able to see, well, what was the result of that? And not surprisingly, when you are freed from those regulatory restrictions and can focus on the needs of the child, quickly addressing your staffing, changing your programs, innovative ways, outcomes improved, and they improved dramatically. New Orleans has changed a little bit, but it's still one of the most less regulated school districts in the country. So two bills that are moving right now in Idaho, based upon that frustration that was expressed about, well, why do we have to have regulations that private schools don't, is to allow innovative districts, to allow individual schools to become charter authorizers. And whether you're a magnet school, a micro school, a charter school, a traditional school, private school, homeschool, all these options need to be available for the parents. But we need to think beyond we're funding a system to we're funding a student's education and give the freedom to traditional public schools, just like we do to parents to do that. So something that probably too late since you're just now past your interim and you're moving on to your next phase in the session. But, 2027 is around the corner, and maybe that's something you can think about.
Do you testify in support legislation? For instance, I know income tax. I've heard that the legislature's like, well, the income tax doesn't matter. We don't need to reduce it by 1%. Well, excuse me, but for the people that are working and contributing to the income tax, it does matter, and it's a policy that's actually part of penalizing people that work, which is behavior that we want to reward in our society. So how are you guys making a pitch to help legislators try and
so first just let me say amen. It matters tremendously. We don't write bills and we don't lobby for bills, and you won't see us in a legislature except if we are invited by an elected official to testify. We will, and provide information on our research. So if I was invited to testify on one of the income tax bills, I would say that right now you have the highest regional income tax in the region, and that is not good for your competitiveness.
And I mean, the people that are obviously, like I said, behavior. We want people to be working, and when you reward people that don't work and to penalize people that do work, and the harder you work and the more money you make, it's even.
And you just reminded me of something I forgot to mention in this, another recommendation that we discussed with the governor's office and would encourage for Montana are revenue triggers, right? You're seeing, there's a race going on across the country right now that Montana's not a part of yet, is to be who's going to be the next state to eliminate their income tax, right? Arizona's gotten very close. Mississippi's got bills moving not Mississippi. Missouri's got bills right now to eliminate their income tax. One of the ways you can get to this conversation is obviously you have to have a flat rate. That's the first thing you have to have. Then you have revenue triggers. So unfortunately, it's sounding like we're going to be entering a recession this year. So you may be saying, well, why are we talking about revenue triggers? Again, 2027 is around the corner. So what you do is in your budget structure, I would recommend to have a constitutional 10% reserve of your expenditures. Right? So you always have that for the downturn. But
have a dollar amount.
Okay,
It's
dollar
not
amount.
It's in statute.
The statutes always make me scared because statutes can be suspended. But have your reserve, whatever you've allocated, deemed to be appropriate for your level of spending to weather a recession. And then everything above that, and then in your revenue process, let's say that your forecast, you need to have 4% growth to meet your maintenance budget needs and policy add-ons, but your growth is forecasted at 7%. You take a fraction of that and automatically buy down your income tax rate, so that you're not having, when you have huge swings, you're not having to do special sessions or rebates or one-time reductions. You're just kind of baking into the process. When you've got a good reserve, you have extraordinary revenue growth, it just automatically starts buying down your rate.
One other thing I was going to mention is that we have testified about a dozen times at least this session, not only here in Montana, but in Idaho as well. So we are always happy to provide testimony. We won't come to the committee hearing and say vote for this or vote against it, but we will say we believe this is good policy because so-and-so, or we believe this is not good policy because so-and-so. But as Jason mentioned, the only way we're going to do that is if we get an invitation from a lawmaker to do that. Because we are not a lobbying group, so we don't want to go from committee room to committee room and tell legislators do this or do that. The cleanest way to do it is just say we need an invite, and typically we get dozens of invites every year to come and testify. One thing I did want to mention before we wrap it up today is our little friend here. So this is Mr. Wonk, and you might be saying, why do you have a stuff? I'm just gonna. There we go. Why do you have a stuffed animal? Well, a promotions company sent me this because they were trying to get us to spend some money with them, which we haven't done yet, but this guy came. Wonk is a tool that we launched at Mountain States Policy Center this legislative session to use AI to read every bill that has been introduced and give you a plain English explanation of what the bill would do. And so this is the first of its kind tool in the country for any think tank, in fact. And with the 1,400 plus bills as of this morning that have been introduced in the Montana session, you can go onto our website, you can click on Wonk, and you can type in the bill that you're looking for, and he will bring it up and he will read through it in about 2 or 3 seconds and then give you the explanation of what it would do. You can also ask Wonk any questions that you might have. You might say, hey, Wonk, does this increase taxes? Or does this limit freedom? Any question that you might have, you ask him, he will respond. The more questions he gets, the better he becomes at knowing what to look for when he's reading the bills. So I'm not a big tech guy. This is just something that I'm told from our AI tech folks, that over time he will become smarter and smarter and smarter and be able to hopefully tell you everything with 100% accuracy. As of this morning, he's about 95% accurate from what we're being told, 96, somewhere in there. But the more questions you ask of Wonk, the better he gets. So we're really excited about this. Again, it's the first time this has ever been tried by any state think tank. And he is reading right now about 4,000 bills between all the states that we cover, which is pretty remarkable. And if you've ever tried to read a bill, unless you're a lawyer like Clay, you don't really understand what the bills would do. Or I mean, there's a lot of legal jargon sometimes in these bills. So that is what Wonk is here to do, is to help out the general public who may not have the time to read through all the legislation. With that, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. Just so you were all aware, our board this year approved a $1.6 million budget, which makes us the largest think tank of our kind in the region, and we're really, really excited about that. 2 years from now, we hope to be standing here in the state capitol during the legislative session and being led by a Montana policy director. That is one of our next hires on our list, is to have someone on the ground here, especially throughout the legislative session, but throughout the entire year as well. So and it sounds like Secretary Jacobson's going to sign up to take that job. Maybe we'll see.
Just another quick question. Thank you so much. What year is this? Because the comparing states brochure for years does this.
I believe that is 2023 data.
Okay, because in 2023, Montana was debt free. So I'm just curious why it says we've got state debt.
Most of those data points come from the analysis that the Tax Foundation does. And so we work with them on coming up with the numbers. So I would have to double check on that and get back to you. That may be including local debt, or it might be including any school district debt. I'm not 100% sure, but it may not just be state. Any other questions? Or yes, Clay.
Obviously, you have a lot of people from Secretary of State Office.
Yes, thank you all for being here.
I know that you guys wrote a number of articles on ranked choice voting in the past. Do you have any comments on that or any other election-specific issue that you're seeing, potentially trends or anything to that effect?
Well, I mean, as you saw on the ranked choice voting, that was on the ballot in several states, and the only one that it passed in was the repeal effort in Alaska, failed by 800 votes. But they're rerunning that repeal again this next year. They're going to keep trying until they get rid of it. So when we look at this debate across the country, advocates are talking about open primaries, which living in Washington, I love. I don't have to register by party. I'm voting for the two candidates, and the two top candidates, whether they're both Republicans, they're both Democrats, or they're both unaffiliated, that's who moves to the ballot, right? That's, I think, an appropriate way to structure a primary is in an open primary. That is not what ranked choice voting is. And unfortunately, the ranked choice voting proponents, because they know it's unpopular and it's complicated and people don't like it, have hijacked the support for open primaries and tried to marry them. So I guess the short answer is I would encourage you, and we have in our policy manual, to consider open primaries. I think there's a lot of benefit to that, but the ranked choice voting doors should stay nailed shut and never opened. And I can get into reasons why, but I think you're very versed in that.
And there is a section in the policy manual about that as well. Any other questions? Nope. Well, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Again, 2 years from now, this is just the first event that we've done at the Capitol. So 2 years from now, we hope to introduce you to our new Montana policy director and hold hopefully a larger event in the rotunda is our plan. So we'll be reserving that probably tomorrow to make sure that we have a spot there in 2027, probably in January or February. So thank you all for being here. You're welcome to take all the materials. And in fact, you'd do us a favor if you took them, because then we don't have to haul them back. And we can distribute them throughout the building as well, even more so. So thank you all for being here.